Hey everyone, and welcome to Procure Pulse, the managed services podcast that provides you with current trends, best practices, and the latest supply chain news to help you stay informed. I'm Mickey Meehan, your host, and I'd like to invite you to email us with all your questions at info@conductive.com or connect with us on LinkedIn by following Conductive or on Twitter at Conductive Inc. Thanks so much for joining us today. Let's get started. Welcome to Procure Pulse, the podcast for third-party services. I'm Mickey Meehan, Conductive's Chief Operating Officer. Today I'm joined by Mandy Bologna, one of our Directors of Customer Success, as we discuss how to inspire and engage stakeholders. Welcome, Mandy. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Mandy, I know that you've been with Conductive for a long time and have worked in lots of different areas and have lots of different experience across the sourcing spectrum. But one of the things that you specialize in is engaging stakeholders and suppliers. Um, it'd be great for you to just start off by maybe telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you even got into strategic sourcing.
Yeah. So I'm what you would get, I guess, consider a legacy employee of Conductive. So I started literally at the bottom up and worked my way up to customer success. So I originally started in the operations team, working in vendor management and supplier stakeholder management. Um, and then from there, the natural lead was straight into strategic sourcing, where I learned stakeholder management and engaging supply chain and those daily end user stakeholders. And from there, I moved into customer success, which just expanded on my experience. So I've been working in strategic sourcing for about 7 years and in purchase service about 7 years, but I've been customer facing for about 15.
That's awesome. I mean, you have tons of experience across a multitude of health systems to kind of really provide us with some great feedback today on a wide array of different ways to work with stakeholders. So, with that, Mandy, let's dive into today's topic, shall we?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
So, the supply chain must know their stakeholders well. They need to speak their language, understand their business needs in order to deliver the appropriate service levels. We've seen often there can be tension associated with meeting a customer's needs in a cost effective manner, which means supply chain needs to figure out a way to secure buy in from stakeholders. What have you seen as what you would say as the biggest challenge for stakeholders in getting that buy in?
It really comes down to three areas: trust, communication, and knowledge sharing. Let me delve a little bit into it for you. The stakeholders are normally those day to day point of contacts within most of these categories, and they're going to be your subject matter experts. They're going to hold all the knowledge. They're also the ones who are managing the vendors and building those relationships. Stakeholders can be very protective in letting supply chain in their day to day business and contracts, rightfully so. Many times they've had these contracts and relationships for years, and it's often difficult for them to allow someone else to come in there and evaluate their contract, simply just even for fear of having to change vendors or to find out that the vendor who you thought was your strategic partner and friend has might have been taking advantage of you.
For sure. So it sounds like in order to move contracts forward, building credibility and securing trust from stakeholders is key. How do you do that without alienating stakeholders?
So the best way to do that is literally involving your stakeholders in the process right from the beginning and letting them know that you need their subject matter expertise for the category and for the decision. Supply chain wants to support the decision making process and the stakeholders' decision with appropriate terms, conditions, SLAs, but they don't want to take that decision making process away from the stakeholders. So they need to get down on their stakeholders levels and they need to find out what are their pain points? What do they like? What do they dislike? What are the needs that are not being met for them within any given category or contract? By doing this, supply chain can help ensure that the stakeholder is getting the best quality of service for the appropriate price of the service levels needed. By engaging your stakeholders to review the events and lend their expertise, they feel involved, valued, and they feel that they are truly leading to the best decision. When they feel more valued, they'll be more engaged in the process and they'll become a champion for you down the line. This allows your organization to standardize your process, centralize these contracts while giving the stakeholders a voice and decision making authority that they deserve, which honestly is basically how we do our managed sourcing at Conductive. We get our buy in with our stakeholders, the customers in supply chain at the organizations we work with. You build the trust, the communication, and trust the expertise of each part of the team, and the job gets done.
That makes a lot of sense, Mandy. And I think we're hearing a consistent theme here around trust, communication. At what point in the process does this all happen? I'm assuming a lot of this communication really needs to happen up front to really kick things off, but also be true throughout the entire way. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. It's a
Perfect.
multi step process.
And so with that, how do they balance mitigating concerns and utilizing the knowledge that they have in order to really lead stakeholders into mutually beneficial outcomes?
So, what they can do is start by having an open discussion with the stakeholders about their current contracts. Is that agreement meeting their needs? Are they satisfied? What could be improved to make the contract better? Primarily, they're looking to add value to meet the stakeholders' day to day needs. Additionally, setting up the expectation of what is going to be needed from the stakeholder at the get go and when is really important in the process, because you have to understand that you might be adding to or taking away from their workload. And so it's very important to include these stakeholders in the approval process, whether that's at the research, the generation of scope of work, proposal review, and obviously negotiations and awards. Secondly, understanding that in most cases, these stakeholders have managed this process in the past and built these relationships with suppliers, it's going to be really hard for them to allow to someone come in and just take over the process. So you need to be a team, acknowledging their feedback and their expertise is needed in making the process successful and beneficial for the organization. It's key. The end goal is not just to engage the stakeholder, but rather to improve the service levels, pricing, and the relationship not only with the supplier and stakeholders, but also supply chain, so that everyone walks away feeling they have a win win. Lastly, we have to remind ourselves that while sourcing and contracting is one of supply chain's main focuses, it's likely not for our stakeholders. And keeping that in mind goes a long way for them. Setting up those goals for each step of the process and what that intended outcome is for each party at each step. By centralizing this approach, supply chain team can demonstrate the value to their stakeholders by bringing in concepts used and seen in negotiations that stakeholders don't normally have visibility to, which is going to strengthen the position of the organization.
So, it sounds like adding on to trust and communication is what I would say is like thoughtfulness or planning. And that really goes a long way. The more forethought that supply chain can put into the process in order to take burden off the stakeholders, the better off they're going to be. So with that, what type of things can supply chain teams do to really demonstrate or have empathy for the fact that they understand the impact of their sourcing process on stakeholders, yet knowing that process is important to ensuring that the organization has its risk mitigated and ensuring they get the best price and the best service.
You just hit the nail on the head, empathy. Not to sound cliche, but literally walking a mile in their shoes. Imagine yourself as a stakeholder, what they're doing on a daily basis, what their workload is like, and then knowing that you might be adding to their plate. This way, you can properly level set their expectation at each step of the process and try to mitigate the number of meetings, the number of requests, the number of approvals. In advance, set out those goals you're going to accomplish both at the organizational level, the supply chain level, and the stakeholder level. And you have to help them understand that you're here to collaborate with them and improve their current state by streamlining the process, providing transparency to them, and opening the lines of communication so the stakeholder can still do their day to day operations without being impacted by your sourcing process. Best practice is to outline a charter and a list of what we're going to do for you, but what you need to do for us too. This way, everyone's on the same page.
And I think what we've seen that totally makes sense, Mandy. What we've seen is we have what we call a readiness program at Conductive that helps customers really install a true governance process for purchase services, and that's a process that they have for other areas, like bringing in new medical devices through a value analysis team. It's a very similar concept, but what it does is puts a structure in that stakeholders really know what to expect from the start. And again, I think just the more advanced warning it sounds like that they have, the more used to a process they are, the better off this is going to work for everybody. Would you agree?
I would, and making sure that they also get an input in that process because it affects them as well.
No, that's a great point. And I think, yeah, not dictating, making them feel like they're part of the team. We're all in this together. I'm going to get, I'm going to help you get these things and you're going to help me, make sure we get the best price and get our risk covered. That's such a good point. So, you know, given all of these considerations and learnings taking place, is there anything else sourcing teams can do to ensure stakeholders are getting exactly what they need? It sounds like, including them in the process is a big piece of that, but is there anything else you can think of?
Yeah. So obviously, keeping that open line of communication for feedback and transparency throughout the process, leaving that opportunity for them to give their input and move forward. And the best process is not static, it's dynamic and ever changing. And if you keep that in mind, you will only be successful.
Absolutely. I think reminding yourself that things are always going to be changing. Events are going to happen outside of our control. COVID is a great example. We changed a lot of internal processes and committees and movements due to that. And there's other things that can happen within an organization that need that. And making sure that you're taking some regular step, whether it's monthly or quarterly or biannually, whatever it is, to take a hard look at you know why do we have this process here? Can we make it any better? Can we make it easier on everybody involved? Will definitely go a long way. So, we've covered a lot here today. I think the five easy to remember takeaways from this discussion are clear communication, building intra-organization transparency. I think trust goes right along with that. Taking the time to set clear, achievable goals mutually, thinking of your stakeholder as your partner and being empathetic to their situation and the fact of, that they have to use that service provider in their day-to-day job. And then ultimately building a dynamic process. And so Mandy, I really appreciate your time today and helping us discover these five things. It's been a great discussion.
Happy to share one of my favorite passions.
And while this sums up our podcast for today, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What challenges have you faced in engaging stakeholders in your sourcing process? What worked best in working across multiple departments? Share your thoughts and bring us any additional questions related to purchase services trends or best practices by emailing us at info@conductive.com. Again, I'm Mickey Meehan, your host, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.